All right, it is 6:36. We have a quorum, so we can get started with roll call.
Okay, we have Alexander Church, we have Michael Lemble, we have Vickiana Demora, Gregory Nato, Christina Amano, myself, the Executive Director, Sharice Vickers, Adriana Lanalaya, and our council, Bob Clark.
Great, thank you. Items 3 and 4 on the agenda have been struck. We will move those public hearings to a later date when we can get our stenographer present. The next item is reading and approval of minutes from the previous meeting. I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting.
Can I ask a question about minutes? Minutes probably across many boards. With today's technology, because we video all of our meetings, it's really easy to run through. Even Word has a program where it literally takes everything that's said. Is there a reason that we paraphrase? We don't just record what's actually said?
I would defer to Bob, but I would say normally the minutes are to discuss or to paraphrase what was.
I think it's a fair point in 2025 that program exists. It can be done and run through relatively simple. I think it saves the agency staff some time. I just don't know what the expense is.
Microsoft Word does it for you for free. I do it with meetings all the time.
I'm not aware of that. But I'll use that app. I'll find out. But the chair's point of the tradition has always been, it's a summary of the meeting. It's not a verbatim of the meeting, but if the technology exists for verbatim, most of it. I mean, it's a long video now anyways.
I'm not quite ready to turn that task over to our robot overlords just yet, I don't think, but definitely noted for the future. Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes from the previous meeting?
I'll make that motion. I'll also note that one of our missing, the person missing tonight is a clerk, and she may have her site. So, but I make that motion.
Great. Is there a second? I'll second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
We'll move on to the report of the treasurer.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to start with the operating account 2847. There's an opening balance of $600, 2007-27-22, with total deposits of $14,574.60. Disbursements of $148,825.88, leaving a closing balance of $468,475.94. For the payroll account 8243, there's an opening balance of $26,841.31, with disbursements of $11,181.39. There was interest paid of $357.50. Having the deposits of It's missing a page? We can come back to the payroll as they figure that out. Applications funds account ending in 2855. There's an opening balance of $14,151.44 with no transactions, having a closing balance of $14,151.44. For the lesser tender account ending in 2863, There's an opening balance of $2,516.79 with interest of $6.95, having a closing balance of $2,523.74. The labor monitoring account ending in 7072, there's an opening balance of $15,000 with no transactions, having a closing balance of $15,014.79. Our money market account ending in 2871, there's an opening balance of $1,284,108.81 with $3,544.49 interest, having a closing balance of $1,287,653.30. The Newburgh South Logistics Center account ending in 6521, opening balance of $48,021 with deposits totaling $4,947.29 with disbursements of $4,941, having a closing account of $54.50. The Provident account ending in 4346 with no opening balance and 0 transactions. The Provident account ending in 5683 having opened a balance of $4,258,821.87 with the interest of $52,785.73, having a closing balance of $4,311,607.60.
Okay, so for the payroll account, I usually don't separate it with deposits and checks because obviously we don't do many deposits in the payroll account, but for the year, I did the $1,035. Yes, thousand for the estimated payroll for 2025, which leaves a balance for deposits for the payroll account of $135,357.50.
And that leaves an ending balance of $151,017.42 for the payroll.
Yeah. I have a motion to adopt the treasurer's report for January 2025.
So moved.
I have a second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Yes.
The motion to approve the payment of bills for January 2025.
It's a motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll move on to the chairman's report. I will keep it pretty brief. Tonight will be the official first time that we are live streaming IDA meetings. This is, I think, an incredible leap forward for the agency. It increases transparency. Hopefully it will increase engagement amongst the public. The IDA conducts important business, and these meetings have been typically poorly attended unless there's a controversial project on the agenda. The idea here is to not just increase transparency, but engagement. Hopefully more members of the public will show up. We'll have a broader conversation about what economic development in the city should look like. And I'm happy to see some folks who are actively engaged in that, and happy to see some new visitors here as well. And I will also note again during this report, we did have 2 public hearings scheduled for tonight. Those will be pushed to March when a stenographer can be present, though I'm conscious of the fact that technology could provide solutions. I do think it's important to have a contemporaneous, concurrent record in addition to the video recorded record. I just think it's anything we can do for transparency is a move in the right direction. And of course, I think we're all aware that there are members of the public who will turn a P into a mountain. So always providing the maximum amount of transparency and record keeping is preferable. That concludes the chairman's report. Council's report.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. For council's report, very quickly, no movement on the cell tower. We have been in contact with Crown Castle. They need to get approvals. I don't know why it's taking so long, but hopefully next month we'll have the draft before the board. On the adjournments for the public hearings, we will prepare a notice of an adjourned hearing. I think the resolution which required the 25 days has already been satisfied. So whatever the time period is, it is for the rehearing. But I also suggest sending a new letter, cover letter, with a copy of the prior letter to the appointing authority, to the taxing jurisdictions rather, just to reiterate the fact that there's an adjourned hearing and so that they're fully aware. I have no update on Brookfield. I know that Loki Brill has sent over the materials that they require to monitor the local labor. Not sure where that's going. I'm still hopeful that we'll close before the end of the quarter. I thought we'd close at the end of this month, but I will update the board on that. No update on FSH Hotel. I assume they're still trying to do their financing. And then just as a note, my family gave me the trip to spring training, so I will not be at the March meeting, but David Kraft will be here.
It's only acceptable if you're going to the Mets spring training.
I'm going to a Mets spring training.
All right. Double this man's. Okay, thank you, Council. Executive Director's report.
I have a pretty quick report myself. We had the audit that was conducted about 2 weeks ago. We should have a copy of the audit, the draft, by Monday. That was the latest I was told. Therefore, afterwards, I will contact the Audit Finance Committee to go over it very quickly, if there's any comments that need to be done back and forth, and then therefore at the March meeting, we'll pass it as a board. And then I have been in contact with MRB for the UTEP, and I did message you both, or some of the board members. So she was suggesting that it would be a 4-hour retreat. I kind of just wanted to take everybody's temperature now if you thought that that was okay. I wanted to throw out some dates. I feel like work session and city council meeting days are kind of like a no. So maybe something in the middle of the week, like a Tuesday, Wednesday, if that works for everyone. Maybe if I do a Calendly invite where everybody can just give me the dates, but more so what we're looking at is like a 4-hour, not to take up everybody's entire day, work half a day or whatever. So that's where I left off with her with that. I'll reach out to you with the dates and the times for that. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you, Cher. We can move on to new business. We have resolution number 2026-2-6-26, -01, Board of Structural Engineer RFP.
If I just might add, so on the last page, we totaled all of the responses that we got. Actually, nobody is an MWBE. They all have the ability to contract out some of their services to an MWBE, but none of them have that. So if it's price, that's going to determine which one you would like to award it to. Then Barton and Lucidice came the least, and then it was tied by MRB and GPI.
And just for the benefit of the public and those in attendance who may not be aware of what this resolution is, can you just provide some background on this resolution?
Sure. So the Armory, which the IDA owns, has a tenant, that is the county, and before the county would like to renew their lease with the IDA, they had some structural issues that they wanted to be addressed to comply with CSEA, the local union that employs people there. And so because we have no idea how much this would cost and what would be involved, we issued an RFP for a structural analysis that addressed some of the items that we saw in photos that we received.
Okay, great, thank you so much.
Can I also ask, who walked around with the engineers?
We did not do that. We had some photos that we were provided with, and those were shared with everyone.
So nobody's been in the building?
Nobody's been in the building, but we mentioned in the RFP that we would expect them to make site visits due to the amount of inquiries that we received going in there and making site visits. Our attorney, JMP invited us that that would not happen at this stage.
Follow-up question, just from the pictures that we saw and communications we've received from CSEA, is there any reason to believe at this point that the alleged structural problems require an investigation would require particularized knowledge beyond what any public engineer licensed in New York State would have?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Pretty standard public engineering.
Correct.
And this is just for them to do an assessment, it's not for them to do.
Correct. To expand on, just to address the concerns that were in the report and in the photos.
Okay, and we do have a low bidder.
Yes, Barton and Judice.
What does this mean afterwards, where it says between 35 and 40,000?
Oh,
I think that's just the next one.
CPL quoted between 35 and 40,000 and gave hourly rates.
Have you worked with any of these groups? I personally worked with all the firms. I think they're all reputable, they all have licensed engineers and all capable. My personal recommendation would be the lowest of our engineers.
Okay, do I have a motion to adopt resolution number 2025-02-26-01, award of structural engineer request for proposal to Barton Mojave?
So moved.
Ms. Church moves the resolution. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call on the resolution.
Michael Nepple,
Aye.
Alexandra Church,
Aye.
Vikiana Demora,
Aye.
Gregory Nato,
Aye.
Christina Amato,
Yes.
and Shonda Paul is absent.
Yeah, resolution adopted. Thank you. We can move on to old business. Review of public hearing for 104 Washington Street LLC. The same item for the Liberty Street Apartments. And then we have a review of resolution number 2023-06-12-7 related to the 191 Washington Street LLC project. We'll take these items in order. I'll just preface the first two by saying, following the public comment portion of the public hearing for these two items and receipt of additional public comments via email, just wanted to give the board an opportunity, now that we have all these materials in our possession, to pose any additional questions, discuss for the public record any questions, concerns, or comments. And I think this can be, kind of a freewheeling discussion. So I'll just open it up to the board at this point.
So I have some general comments that I'd like to make on both of these, and then I have some questions for each of the individual. But I want to start with the main comment. Sorry, I wrote it down because I think it's important. We're being asked to review two projects tonight. This is in regards, specifically to 104 Washington Street and Liberty Street Apartments. We're being asked to review two projects tonight with timelines far exceeding those allowed in our uniform tax policy. I want to state for the record that I do not consider these requests lightly, that in no way is our consideration a precedent for any future applications, and that the only reason I'm personally considering these discrete individual applications is because I recognize that the prior board accepted the applications, and both applicants have spent many, many months before this board. A full reconsideration at this point would significantly delay two projects, both of which I think at face value are extremely positive for Newburgh, significant and beneficial to all residents. That said, clearly our UTAP needs updating and amending to better align with the types of projects seeking relief before this board, and therefore better allowing the board and Newburgh residents to evaluate requests. I propose two things going forward. One, I think it's time for a moratorium on new applications with any deviance from the current UTAP for a period of either 1 year or until our UTAP is updated. If that's in 1 month, so be it. I implore staff and the board to work expeditiously to set up the proposed retreat to consider the changes to the UTAP. Number two, going forward, I propose an automatic rejection of applications eligible for tax relief under section 572 and 577 of New York State's private housing finance law, especially projects intent on forming or joining housing development fund corporations to own and manage the affordability of the projects. These applications should be sent to the city for review under Article 11 of the New York State PHFL. So with that, I have some questions, but if anyone else has general comments, I'm happy to hear that.
I have general comments too, but if you want to ask questions, yeah, go ahead.
So we'll ask questions of each applicant.
We do each project once.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, that's fine. So we'll start with 104.
Do you want one of us to sit up there to run?
You should, so that way the audio is captured on the video. So
104 is on the schedule first.
Well, would you prefer all general comments first and then individual questions, or how do you guys want to do this?
I think that makes sense, yeah. If folks have comments that they want to put on the record, and then we can open up the floor to questions from the board to the applicants.
I have general comments then, before I get into my questions. We got a lot of comments, different comments, kind of ranging all over the place. I agree with you, Ally, that these are important projects for a lot of the reasons that people brought up, that these, sorry, can you not hear me? That these are important projects for a lot of the reasons that people brought up, that these are otherwise fallow pieces of land that would contribute greatly if they had activity, commercial activity, residential activity. I think I slightly disagree, though, with the timeline that we've had. Some of these, one of the projects we've had for a very long time, one of the projects, we got an application last August, and then it was revised again in October, and then revised again in December. So it really has not been in front of us for that long. My general comments to start go to sort of a broad comment that was brought up, and that I think us as a board, some of us individually have had conversations or heard from our community, from our resident neighbors. As Jake mentioned at his public comment, the city of Newburgh's taxes are large. And to put that into perspective, as residents, if you look at the median house sales price of a house within Orange County, it's about $430,000. Beacon, on a $430,000 assessed value of a house, pays about $8,600 in taxes. That's both your school taxes and your property taxes. The town of Newburgh pays about $9,460 for that same $430,000 of value, and the city of Newburgh pays close to $12,000 on that same $430,000 worth of value. The city of Newburgh
is also, of its total taxable value, about 40% of those taxable properties are off the tax rolls in the form of churches, hospitals, schools, nonprofits, the various. So the remaining 50+% of us are carrying a large burden, which is partially why you see the disproportionate amount of taxes that we're paying to live here. One of my very big issues with these, and that I've heard consistently, is we are being asked, even though we are not directly paying taxes, we are getting taxes from a project or from a piece of property that otherwise does not have taxes. We are being asked to essentially subsidize housing as taxpayers for somebody else to live here, when many of those taxpayers, many of my neighbors, and I have very specific examples, can't afford to live here and are losing their houses, and not just houses they bought last year, but generational houses where families are sitting at their kitchen table trying to figure out how to pay their taxes to keep up with the house that their grandmother left them. So this affordability in Newburgh is a really big problem. Affordable housing is a big problem, but affordable housing for Newburghers is a really big problem. And asking existing taxpayers who are already overburdened within the county to pay for additional people to come, as we have heard, that are not necessarily prioritized for Newburgh City residents, to subsidize essentially their housing is kind of a kick in the gut for a lot of people. Understandably. I think to your call, Ally, and we discussed this last month. I agree with you that there should be a moratorium, I think even now, on approving any projects that have to do, with housing. It is not in our UTEP. We have to adjust our UTEP. There was an email conversation about the governor's, mandate policy towards housing and towards agencies that should pursue housing, or agencies should do with what's in their power to pursue housing. Not everybody agrees with that. That is not necessarily steadfast. I'm going to read just very briefly. It was released by Perlman, who is the chairman of the ABO, correct?
No.
Not bad.
The authority's budget office director, Jeff Perlman, excuse me.
He's all for that.
Okay, well, he and Senator Skoufis, when he was the director, said the Orange County, and this is relative specifically to the Orange County IDA, but specific to housing. The Orange County IDA recently announced their intention to move forward with property tax breaks for housing development, an unprecedented move in the agency's 50 years. This flagrant continued disregard for taxpayers is exactly why the state legislature recently approved a first-of-its-kind motion with veto power to be installed within the IDA. Over 125,000 houses and apartment units exist in Orange County. Every single one of them was able to be developed without IDA tax breaks. Yet now, for some reason, the IDA is trying to argue housing development requires taxpayer-funded subsidies. We and our county taxpayers see this move for exactly what it is, a sham. The I in IDA stands for industrial, and there is nothing industrial about housing. In fact, it's an open question whether approving local incentives for housing is even legal under state law. Furthermore, one of the missions of the IDA is to create good-paying, long-lasting jobs. Other than perhaps a single handyman, many of these projects offer little to no permanent job creation. Again, this behavior underscores the need for forthcoming state-appointed monitors. There are a lot of concerns within IDAs giving out benefits for housing, not only for the reasons that I've expressed, but also because of the school districts, which we have yet to hear from somebody from the school district. But it takes valuable taxes away from the school district when you are providing housing where children may reside, but are paying less taxes than are needed to fund those school-aged children. And it has become a rallying cry of the industry, not only of the labor unions, but certain IDAs have flat out excluded housing, as we know, and as we will discuss during our retreat. And some municipalities have actually sued IDAs to try to claw back 30-year benefits that were given because of the disproportionate expense that it has caused to the school districts. I also would like to underscore something else that came up during our actual Audit Finance Committee meeting. We were discussing a decision made by a board, an IDA board of ours, of the city of Newburgh's, over 20 years ago. And they gave a preferential lease at the time to an applicant. It happened to be a bank. And they gave them a 20-year lease for $100 a year, which we have reviewed publicly, has been discussed. In discussing this with the Finance Committee, Vicki Anna, actually next to me, asked why we did this, why we approved the extension of a 20-year lease. And part of the discussion that came up was what happened 20 years ago and the circumstances that led to that bank needing those IDA benefits to have a 100-year lease on a viable piece of property that should be producing taxes and jobs is maybe not the circumstance 20 years later. So the fact that we are stamping something that goes far beyond market cycles, that goes far beyond what the circumstances are now, which we have all seen very clearly how markets change, I think is really significant to think that we are rubber stamping for 30 years and know what the circumstances in 30 years is going to be. That we are essentially asking taxpayers for the next 30 years to do this. I think that it is far longer a time frame for the IDA to consider than we should be asking our neighbors to give tax breaks to. The last thing that I'll say as a general comment is that I'll reiterate again IDAs and at least my position as a resident and a community member. I am more than happy and joined this board with the understanding that we had a tax problem in the city. I am a taxpayer as well. I have been for almost the last 20 years. Every budget season, up until recently, every conversation was, I'm sorry, we have to cut police, cut fire, cut DPW, and we don't have enough codes to do the inspections we need because we don't have enough funds in the budget. But here's a board that is charged with creating some of the most valuable net positive tax rateables the city can have, an extremely valuable benefit that the city of Newburgh has. Commercial tax rateables do not produce children, produce jobs, produce higher tax rateables than housing does. And I join saying, okay, if we can have a plan, if we can give businesses and incentivize them with a leg up to be able to bring these businesses to the city of Newburgh and create these tax rateables, even if it's over a sliding scale of 10, 15 years. 20 years ago, if that had been said, then today we would have a lot of taxes and a lot of jobs on the tax rolls. These businesses are meant to be given a leg up off the backs of the community and the taxpayers in order to become sustainable tax members of the community. I understand that these are important projects, and I think that these important projects can be done. I do not think they need to be asking for pilots from city residents and city commercial taxpayers. I think they need to be providing more jobs. And yeah, I don't really believe that they should be coming to the IDA, because this is not what I believe at least our IDA really should be concentrating on. I think there's enough commercial development that needs to be done and connected to the city. This is what our focus should be. I think that there are other agencies that deal with affordable housing and housing in general.
Okay, I'm just going to address a couple of those comments. And first, I'll just say I think it's very important for members of this board to cite facts and make fact-based arguments when we're having debates in public. I'll take issue, even though I was recently appointed to the board, I didn't join the board. Nobody joins this board. They're appointed to the board by the city council. to carry out the economic development objectives of the city council duly elected officials. Okay? So we all sit on this board because we're appointed by the city council. This is the city council's agenda that we are considering as projects come before the board. And I would say that this board only considers projects that actually come before the board. Right? So we can sit here and say we want more commercial development, but if commercial developments are not, no one is applying for financial incentives for those types of projects, then of course this board isn't considering financial incentives for commercial projects. What we are considering, luckily, and I'll also take issue, as I have previously, with this idea that the IDA is creating jobs, that the IDA is creating economic conditions. Developers create jobs, projects create jobs. This board approves financial incentives from applicants who are seeking to create jobs. So I think we should properly consider the role of this board, okay, and it is to consider applications for projects before the board. We happen to have some excellent projects before the board for consideration. And I think that, both 104 Washington, 104 Washington and the Liberty Street Apartments are generational projects that will bring density downtown, that will help existing businesses who have invested an incredible amount of money, time, and effort into this city sustain themselves as other projects come in to the board for consideration. I think that the public is always best served with robust public debate rooted in fact that creates a public record for examination later. But I think we should be very careful about what we consider the role of the board to be and not engage in the kind of public debate that is going to have a chilling effect on the types of projects we would like to see come before the board. And the idea that this board is quote unquote rubber stamping anything when we have had months of review, public hearings, received public comment, gone back and forth with an independent consultant to analyze these projects for a cost-benefit analysis, a test of reasonableness. I just think really misstates the process that every member of this board has been engaged in for months. And I'll just leave it at that because we have still some items on the agenda and other people that want to make comments. If there are no further comments, of course, we can turn to the question and answer portion.
I do have a question, actually, about that. You mentioned in your statement that we are very cognizant we serve the pleasure of the city council. But the agenda of the IDA is not the agenda of the city government. And I'm going to ask this directly to Bob and to Cher. As we have been directed many times in the past, we are a separate agency of the city. Is that correct?
Yes, but you're appointing authority as a city.
I understand that. They can appoint me and they can fire me.
Right.
But is our agenda the same as the City of Newburgh City Hall agenda?
Ideally, you should be following the desires and directions of your appointing authority, otherwise you serve that power.
Okay, so our agenda should be whatever the city council wants us to.
I didn't say that. I said IDA should follow the trying to think of the right word. IDAs are supposed to follow the agenda set down by the city council and provide financial assistance that complies with the statute. An IDA is not supposed to be acting inconsistent with its appointing authority. The history of IDAs since the late 60s are filled with examples of IDAs that have, for lack of a better term, gone off on their own And those members have been withdrawn, terminated relatively quickly. And so the IDA should, in an ideal situation, should be working hand in hand with its appointing authority. And I think this board has, I can't speak to what went in the past, but certainly recently, I think this board has attempted to notify the city council of what's been going on. The city council has made certain changes. All of that is legal.
I'm not asking you if it's
The IDA should not be a maverick and go off and do something that's inconsistent with the city council's plan. That's not appropriate. But it is an independent agency. You are supposed to act independently. But there are several examples, some of which I've been involved in, where the IDA members have made those decisions, have approved resolutions, and then have been replaced, and the next board came in and rescinded those resolutions. And those rescissions have been upheld by the courts. No applicant has a right to financial assistance. It's a request that can be granted or denied.
So what is the difference between our financial assistance and the pilots that can be provided by the city?
The city, as I understand it, I defer to Alan, but the city, well, let's take it broadly. A broad statement is the statute under the general municipal law requires this agency to have a uniform tax exempt policy. You have that. We have discussed a little bit in this board, but certainly in the prior board and the prior boards, the fact that if you deviate from that UTEP, every time there's an application, you really don't have a UTEP. And so this board recognized that, engaged a consultant who then didn't do very much, and then engaged a second consultant who has attempted to make some changes to make a robust uniform tax exempt policy so that you can tell applicants, as other IDAs do, this is our policy. If you do not agree with the policy, then please go somewhere else. This is our policy, we're not deviating from the policy. The city does not have that, as I understand what I refer to Alan. The city does not have that statutory restriction of having some sort of plan. And the city can determine what's in the best interests of the city and the community. The difference, as Alan mentioned, is there is a private housing law that was passed by the legislature in the overall scheme of trying to create public housing and more affordable housing. And that statute does allow, very specifically, a 40-year pilot that can be granted by the city. As to Ali's question, or to Ali's point earlier, at some point over the last decade, IDAs have been increasingly requested to make those exemptions and so that they would not have to go to the appointing authority. There's, I think, two reasons for that. One, the perception that the IDA can move a little bit quicker, whereas the city sometimes is not as efficient. No insult made, but not as efficient as the IDA can do. And there's also a political aspect. Okay, politically, elected officials may move slowly because they are elected officials, whereas your appointees don't have that restriction. To Michael's point, all projects that are considered in this state over the last decade, dozen years, have been passed with the review of what the project does for the community, not just by bringing in more people, but what those additional residents can do for the commercial aspects of existing businesses and additional businesses that may come in. I'm just commenting, both of these projects
have some commercial businesses, one a lot more than the other. The other two projects on the hearing coming up also have some commercial businesses. 181 was approved because in part of its commercial businesses that were coming in. So that's why the IDAs have, again, for the last dozen years or so, included a commercial finding, retail finding resolution, making it clear that first, this finding is made that this will have a commercial benefit, job creation benefit, improvement of the area for the residents, and then an improvement resolution which refers to that. So back to your original question. This board is an independent body. It should not take, it should not be bobblehead and just say yes to the city council if it disagrees with the city council. But that said, it should not go off on a tangent and it should act consistent with the long-term plan of the city council.
So, may I make a comment? So I've been serving on this board for 3 years. I've never heard of any plan from the city council. Perhaps past chairs have, but I've never been informed of a plan. And then,
I don't think that this is an appropriate place to take the conversation, but I will say that I've worked for the city 2.5 years and I've never seen you at a city council meeting. So
that's not true.
Maybe
I've been to several.
Okay.
But my to end the comment is our UTEP. Everyone knows what our UTEP is. So how did we get to this point with our UTEP the way it is?
That's a question for the board members who've been here for quite some time, operating under this UTEP. Okay, there are members of the board that were just recently appointed that are seeking now to update that UTEP, work that should have been done previously, but here we are.
So, to that point, I believe the UTEP was voted on in 2020 during COVID. It was the day during COVID. And was a vast improvement of what UTEP was, for my best of my recollection. However, applicants started to come in, and other than, for example, Brookfield, which is within the four corners of the existing UTEP, the board did start to deviate. The hotel was the first deviation, I think, under that UTEP. The Foundry,
Wait, why?
in the second deviation,
Refresh my memory. Why was it a deviation?
because it's 15 years.
It's more than.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. I just.
No, it's all right.
It's just a detail. I just wanted to
No,
clarify the detail.
it's helpful for the public to be aware of the fact that members of the board do not recollect the projects that they previously voted on, but are sitting here criticizing the projects that are currently
I'm not
before the
criticizing.
board.
Mike, this doesn't need to be confrontational. You ask for comment until you or the city council decides to fire us. We still have a right to make comment without being targeted for that comment.
I think a robust public debate is in everyone's best interest. Okay, and I'm not going to be gaslit here at the IDA board on a Wednesday night. Okay.
Well,
I think we can move on to the question and answer portion of this item. I don't think we're cutting anybody's comments short. These projects have been long considered for many, many months. There has been a lot of opportunity to put comments on the record. I'm cognizant that we are streaming for the first time and people may be enjoying that new feature of our meeting. It's a little too much. So if we have questions for 104 Washington, about 104 Washington for Mr. Pierre, now would be the portion of the meeting that's appropriate for those questions.
So my first question is, how did you determine the term of, which I want to point as an amended pilot? So how did you determine the term of the amended pilot request, and what reasonable basis did you have to consider that request that ultimately is 3 times the maximum in our current term?
Sure, that's, first of all, thank you everyone for your time and your comments. The term of the amended application was determined to be commensurate with the level of and type of funding that the project is receiving from other agencies, notably Orange County Home, New York State Home and Community Renewal, and the permanent financing that the project is receiving from the Community Preservation Corporation, which is a private lender. The terms of that financing and grants and awards stipulates 30-year affordability periods for those funds and for that funding. And since the rents and the revenue of the project is predetermined or limited or restricted for 30 years, the funding is requesting that the taxes or the expenses of the project also be limited for that same amount of time. And the proposal is that the rents are allowed and meant to increase over time to keep up with inflation, cost of living, that the pilot payments themselves would also grow. So we are essentially applying the Accounting 101, which is matching revenues and expenses over time. That's the premise of the pilot and the duration of the pilot.
So a follow-up question is, and this is how the Albany IDA seems to be working on these, is splitting of the commercial and the residential portion, so that the commercial portion would go before the IDA, the residential portion would go under section 577 before the city council. Is that something you consider? Do you have thoughts on that? And I will say for the record that I fully support that. I believe we should have 30-year affordability clauses. One of my actual concerns is not anything to do with any of these projects, but is that the IDA to this point doesn't have a mechanism to tie our pilot to hold you, or more importantly, the potential future owner of the project back to those affordability requirements, the same way that the city council under the housing finance law is able to. And so that's my personal concern. And again, so the question is, had you considered going to both? Is that just too complicated, or what was the idea to be here alone?
Yeah, that was not the path that we chose, or that we were advised to choose. Thank you. I think we, at some point last year, made an overture to the city council to maybe have the project be considered for a pilot in that forum. We're not partial to who grants the pilot. We're focused on the goal here, which is to get this project built. So whoever we need to talk to, whomever we need to apply to, we're happy to do that. We have a positive history of doing business, quote unquote, with the IDA, so it was familiar territory. And just to the point about how would the IDA regulate the affordability component, it's not my place to say whether or not it should be. It should try to understand or regulate affordable housing, but other agencies who are providing the financing understand affordable housing very well and have deed restrictions and other mechanisms that enforce, for lack of a better term, that affordability with the property in ways that are very aggressive if we or future owners don't comply with what is essentially a regulatory restriction and a deed restriction. So the clause are deeply embedded in the deed of the property, even though the IDA doesn't necessarily speak to that in its authority.
That's the end of my questions.
We have additional questions from Mr. Pia.
Yeah, and this is going to be for both projects. How much of a momentum grant did you receive?
$3,050,000.
And how much, I'm just trying to look through, how much is that of your total capital? Or rather, better expressed, how many grants, how much are grants as part of your percentage of your capital stack of loans or equity? Do you have additional besides momentum grant?
Additional grants?
Grants, yes.
Funding?
Yeah.
I think it's all technically, all the other funding is structured as debt.
Okay.
The home fund is technically debt until the regulatory restriction is, or until we meet the term of the grant, and then it is forgiven at the end of that term. But it is otherwise considered debt, and there is interest, albeit nominal, paid on that. But it is technically structured as subordinate debt.
Okay. So how much of your capital stack is forgivable versus?
Well, it's not forgivable. It expires, I think, is perhaps a better term. That would be the Momentum Fund is a grant, to my understanding. Momentum funding is very new. The actual regulatory agreement hasn't even been published or hasn't been shared with us. But to our understanding, that is a grant. It is forgivable, and that is the only one.
Okay, that's the only one. Okay. My other question is, what is your exit strategy?
It's a good question. Our strategy is to hold for the long term. The funding that is made available for projects like this is very complicated and difficult to, is not easy to transfer to a new owner.
It's not assumable.
It is, but there are layers of approvals at the HCR level. The various interest holders have say in whether or not the new owner is accepted and must meet criteria both in terms of liquidity, but also in terms of their ability to manage affordable housing, because it's much more complicated than market rate property management, as you know. So there are general conditions by which this funding can be passed on to a new owner, but it seems to be written in such a way that it would discourage that kind of transfer of ownership, especially with the PLP program, which is run by Madeline Fletcher at HCR, who's run the Newburgh Community Land Bank. These are financing products that are quite new and have never been taken to term. So exactly how these deals unwind is unclear. But our strategy is to stay in for the long.
And you will manage?
We will manage, or we will hire a qualified third-party management company.
And my last question, I had a conversation today with MRB. I had some questions about some of these tests that were done on both projects and how the capital stack works. And I don't know if it's in both cases or if it's just specific to funding source. Your development fee, do you achieve that with your construction loan, or does that come over a period of time?
Yeah, there, some of the fee is earned upfront, a small amount, and the rest is paid out through operational cash flow. It's pretty much the absolute very last thing to ever get paid, if ever it does get paid out of this project, which is unlikely perhaps at this point, but who knows, we're here to get it done.
Those are my questions.
Are there additional questions from members of the board?
I have a general one for Bob, but this will be for both of them, but I'll ask it now. And so it went to my last question that I asked. So, and there very well may not be an answer tonight, but how can or is there a possibility for the draft pilot to include language that ensures the affordability for the entire term of the pilot? I know Ithaca or Tompkins County has been trying, and so they may be the only one that's trying, but you know, I would be interested in seeing something like that or a recommendation. So a general question, maybe a statement.
We can consider that. I know Tompkins has been working on that. I think there's one other county that was also out west. You know, it's been a struggle to try and figure out how to maintain. You know, not necessarily to maintain the developer in the project, but to maintain a developer of some sort to manage the project for the entire life, which is the point. Because, you know, 32 years, I'm not going to be here 32 years.
All right, if there are no additional questions from members of the board on this project, at this time I'd like to thank Mr. Pierre for once again coming before the board to answer all questions, receive all comments. I will say that this is an incredibly exciting project. It will allow you to expand an existing business that is very successful here in the city, while also providing density downtown, providing affordable housing, and the amount of financial assistance requested from the IDA for all of these benefits that the community will receive is actually quite broad. So thank you for bringing this project before the IDA, and thank you for appearing tonight.
I have one thing I did want to say too, which was in review of all the public comments. I do have to say, I think the vast majority are strongly in support of this project. And my questions, and I think the other people on the board, were mostly about the turn. The concern seems to be the turn. So I do want to state that for the record. I was very happy to see such positive feedback on this and the other application.
Thank you, and I'll thank you very much for all of that. And the one comment I think I wanted to just make is that we're making a long-term investment in the city of Newburgh and affordable housing. And we are asking this for the city of Newburgh to meet us there and make an investment in long-term affordable housing. This is how we do that together. And everyone is really just ready for a vote, and this will unleash a lot of momentum for us to get this project started. So thank you for all your questions.
Thanks. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Shriver up to the microphone to discuss the Liberty Street Apartments LLC application for financial assistance. I think we can follow the same format, and we'll first open it up to general comments from the board, if there are any, and afterwards we can move into the question and answer portion.
Yeah, I have a general comment. We've been repeatedly asked to consider a project at 1 Lafayette Street. I need to note for the record that parcel 40-4-1, AKA 1 Lafayette Street, is owned by the Palisades Interstate Park Commission and is therefore not eligible for tax relief, and it is fully tax exempt. I resent the confusion repeatedly sown by Liberty Street Apartments, which is actually the name of the project you're viewing tonight.
You want to start off with questions? You go, I'll go after you.
If there are no additional general comments from the board, we can move into the question portion. I'll take that to mean that there are no additional general comments. So whoever has questions, we can kick that. Actually, you know what? Let me ask a couple questions because I know that we are streaming for the first time. We have some new guests in the room. Welcome. It is great to see more members of the community engaged here with the IDA. Just want to ask Mr. Sharber to highlight some of the top lines for the project.
Sure, absolutely. These projects take many years. This was a concerted effort on my part to negotiate with the owner of this parcel for 1.5 years. It took steadfast commitment to get him to the table and to get him to agree at a price at which this project would be financially viable. Once that was achieved, we went through a lengthy entitlement approval process with all 3 city boards. We worked with the ARC tirelessly to ensure that the design of this project met their standards in terms of what would be appropriate in this historical context. We reached out to SHPO, right, which controls the historic site next door, and made sure they were on board with this project, right, as we are required to because it's receiving state funding. We then worked our way through the planning board with respect to improvements to the streetscape, right? This is almost an entire city block, lacking a sidewalk in our central business corridor, right? The city has various objectives when it comes to safe streets, right? Bump out, crosswalks, stormwater sequestration, lighting, so ensuring that the project not only, achieved on its number 1 goal, which is housing and retail, which I'll get to in a second, but also reciprocated back to the community in terms of creating literal pathways for people to travel where there are none. And then, of course, went through the zoning board with respect to 2 deviations, completed a rigorous traffic study to assess the impacts of this project, and are now here. And so, the project is 145 units, 128 of which are affordable, between 30 and 80% AMI, right? The average of those AMIs is 60%, and then there are 18 units of market, in addition to 11,000 square feet of retail, which will be broken up somewhere between 4 and 6 retail units, depending on the types of businesses as this project comes to fruition that may seek to occupy those spaces and serve those residents as well as the larger community. I think that's a good summary.
This is currently the large unsightly vacant lot on Liberty Street.
Correct, yes.
Smack dab next to Washington's headquarters?
Correct.
Okay. And how long has that lot been vacant?
So the existing factory, or the previous factory complex that was there, burned down in 1981. It had been vacant for 10 or 15 years. It had been the focus of the city's economic development department. At the time, it was considered to be the most critical project that needed attention as a means of jumpstarting the downtown. Unfortunately, it did burn down. But at the time that it was there and was vacant, it was the focus of the city as a critical project that needed to be turned around at that time, that period.
And do you know offhand the current taxes on the vacant parcel annually?
Yes, I do. It is exactly, give me 1 or 2 seconds, I will pull that up.
It's $9,000 a year.
$9,000 a year.
Okay, yes, I was going to get the exact number, but currently $9,321 a year.
Okay. And over the lifetime of the pilot, the revenue, the tax revenue generated for the taxing jurisdictions, if I remember correctly, is over $7 million in new tax revenue?
That is correct. The exact number is, sorry, $8,394,000.
$8 million in new tax revenue over the lifetime of the pilot. Okay, great. I think those are all my questions for the moment. I'll turn it over to other board members who may have questions for Mr. Schroeder.
So I can go first, and again, that despite the name, I think this is a project that we had overwhelming positive support for. The one question that was repeated again and again was about the timing. So again, my questions are specifically to the timing requested, and you do not, the previous applicant went very deep into some, so you just surface level is fine, because I think the public probably understands. But again, how did you determine the term of the pilot request, and what reasonable basis made you consider a request that amounts to 3 times the maximum that are your time allowed?
Yes, exactly, absolutely. So this is what's called the 4% tax credit deal. The state will be providing tax credits which partially fund the project. A requirement that they have is that there be a commensurate so those tax credits are 15 years. I'm going to try not to get too deep. The requirement is that we find a lender willing to lend for 30 years. A lender is not going to lend on a project in which the rents are capped unless there is certainty around what the taxes will be, because taxes are set as a result of a city budget and can fluctuate. So they are looking for certainty when it comes to what the future tax liability will be against that future income, which itself is limited, right?
Thank you. And then the follow-up question, the same follow-up question that was asked previously was, did you consider going to the IDA for the commercial component and the city council for the residential component? Is that something you considered, and if not?
Why? We did not consider it. My experience previously working on the foundry, we'd worked with the IDA. It was a good process. The IDA understood the impactfulness of that project and worked with us at a very risky time. This was in the middle of COVID. It was a bankruptcy auction. We had a limited period of time to close. And so the IDA supported us in that project. We were, and I'd like to think that that support was, honored in the sense that we finished the project. That was a great success. And so insofar as we're comfortable with the process and have engaged in it once so far, we made the decision that it was appropriate to come back.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
I have some questions. You originally submitted an application in August of 2024 for a 42-year pilot that was worth $15 million of pilot breaks. And then in October, it went to a 32-year pilot, and then was revised again in December. Why did that change? What was the difference?
Between 42 and 32. That was a miscommunication within the development team in terms of the term of the pilot that needed to be granted respective to what the state agency was expecting.
Okay, so that was an initial request for 17 million, and then it went down to 7 of essentially pilot tax break, 7.12 something.
You're gonna have to let me double check that.
Okay, let me just ask while you're looking at that.
Can I just look one thing
Sure.
at a time? Is that
Yep.
all right? So, our first request was for 10 million. So I'm not sure where you're getting that number, but I just want to be very clear about that. We did not ask for $17 million in abatement. That's more than planned to be taxed or not to be abated.
No, I have the application here. The total of the 42 years was $14,692,851.
I can check the application directly, but the sheet that I have it's otherwise, so give me another second.
Okay, well, this is the application we received August 2024 that I printed out.
Understood, give me a second. So the application states $10,758,000. So I'm not sure what you're looking at. If you'd like to share your direct copy.
Sure. This came right from an email from August of 2024. I'm sure Cher can forward it to you. This is the application that we received. 5072 Liberty Street, project name 1 Morphea. Okay, my next question is, let's see, I'll get about this in a different way. I talked to a representative from MRB today and asked them sort of how the capital stack worked. And how the funding, the timing of the funding. It is my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and it is their understanding, obviously, as you've all said, is very complicated, that you have a certain amount of money up front, which I will ask you about in a second, how much equity you have invested in the project, that the construction loan begins, and once the construction loan begins, then the costs of the project are essentially funded up front. It was also his understanding that there is, I'll get to the development fee in a second, but that of the profits that come off of the project in every year, preference or obviously priority is given to your equity interest who receives their return first, which he said probably happened around year 15, and then 16, 17 additional profits that came off the project through year 32 are separate profits. And he said when those profits were considered profits, which were about the $3 million that he discussed with you, that were refunded basically to the taxpayers or goes towards taxpayer tax dollars of the project, correct?
You're going to have to restate that question.
So any profits that come out of the project originally were stipulated when you proposed it to us were going to be profits of the project that go back to the original investors after the equity was paid back. Any dollars between year 17 and year 32 go back to the investors. But currently, under the current negotiation with MRB, those dollars, that $3 million that after they did the test of reasonableness that went back to pay tax, came out of those dollars.
So maybe I can talk a little bit about the funding mechanism that undergirds this project, and maybe through that, maybe you can then ask me again.
Okay.
I'm having a little trouble understanding what you're specifically asking. So this is an affordable housing tax credit deal, right? And so the way tax credits generally work is the state allocates a certain amount of tax credits. So the project is awarded, right? We then sell those tax credits to a tax credit investor that is a business, typically a bank or another financial institution, that buys those credits at a discount So they then apply to their own tax liabilities, right? So
Yep.
there's an arbitration of that value. A portion of those tax credits is calculated based on the size of the development fee, okay? That development fee must be paid out in order for those tax credits to be viable. So if those payments are not made, then the undergirding calculation, which supports the amount of tax credits that are sold, is undermined, right? And so there's a circular relationship
Sure.
in that context. So over the 15-year period that the tax credit investor is required to be in the project, right, as an owner, similar to a lease-back situation, right? We have to pay off that development fee, right, to the developer, right, from excess cash flows. And so the first 15 years, there has to be certainty that that fee can be paid so that the sanctity or validity of the tax credit is not undermined.
Okay.
So with
So, but they're two
with that
different
understanding
things.
in hand, what is the question?
Okay, so there are two different things. You have built into here a $7.3 million development fee, which according to MRB, there are different ways that development fees with these HUD transactions can be formulated. Sometimes they're $12,000 to $15,000 per unit, which in this case would be about $2.2 million. Traditional development fees are about 5% of your hard and soft costs, which at your current hard and soft costs would be about $5.5 million. So the $7.3 million is a 10% number off of your gross. The development fee, from my understanding, is separate from the return that goes back to the private equity.
Okay, so the development fee that we are permitting.
I understand that you're permitted.
Wait, I'm answering the question. Permitted for this project, and which is set by HCR, okay, is the development fee that is being charged. Okay. Your understanding of what a typical development fee in this instance is not correct.
Okay, so let's see. It is currently costing $512,000 per unit to build these 145 units. Typical market to build market rate housing is about $300,000 per unit. So there's an extra $31 million of cost because these are permitted, affordable, low-income housing tax credit units. Additionally, because of these programs, it allows as much as a 10% development fee on the total construction costs. So you've got a total construction cost of $7.4 million, which also includes that $7.3 million development fee. So you are calculating development fee 10% on the development fee. There is additional percentage on the total cost that's there.
I take issue with your understanding exactly.
Okay.
I don't agree. I would also say that an affordable project, right, has there are many reasons why affordable projects cost more to build. Okay? You have requirements outside of the local jurisdictions of the state, right, HCR, in terms of the size of these units, right, the amenities provided, the quality of construction. HCR has its own handbook, right, for how these units are constructed, okay, which is got a lot of requirements. In addition to that, the financing costs associated with an affordable project are much more complicated than a market rate project, right? Once you introduce tax credits, you're working with the state, you have all sorts of additional financing costs that result, right? These aren't just hard financing costs in the sense that you're paying fees and interest, et cetera, but legal costs. These are incredibly complicated funding mechanisms.
I understand that. It's still costing you almost twice as much. Then market rate units that also have to meet building codes, that also have amenities, that also have extreme soft costs and legal fees and other things as well. I understand that these are not necessarily easy. But what you are asking in doing this, and what I'm asking you is,
Sure.
when do you receive that 7.3 million developer fee?
Okay. So the fee is paid out as the project progresses. So half the fee in totality is paid when the project is complete. There's a breakout of that to some extent, but the majority of that first half is paid when the project is complete. Right. The remaining portion of the developer fee is paid over 15 years. Right. And it's a means of ensuring that process of development, right, maintain the project to the standards that the state expects. Right?
Okay. Let me also ask you, it is my understanding from my conversation this afternoon that the construction loan takes out all of the costs, including reimbursing for all of the costs almost immediately when the construction loan is achieved, which is when the project starts. How much equity are you and your partners putting in before the construction loan starts? And the construction loan isn't presumed to start for what, a few months, a year?
So, our hope is that should we be awarded this pilot, that we will be able to immediately engage the state. This is a priority project for them, or at least it should be. And our hope is that we will enter consideration in March, and that we will be awarded the fall funding round. Right? So that our goal is to start this fall, winter, right? Provided we are selected.
Okay. So how much outstanding equity do your partners have in before that happens?
I don't have the exact number, but safe to say we will be $1 million at risk on this project by the time
That you have invested currently?
But I'm saying by the time we close,
Mm-hmm.
okay, on everything, we'll most likely be up to $1 million anyways.
Okay. So, but then shortly thereafter, you receive a large portion of that developer's fee.
Not a large portion.
You said half, and then 15 years the second half.
So we have two blocks, right? Half and half. Okay. Half is paid out over 15 years. Of that first half, right? The majority of that half is paid out once you complete. A small portion is paid out in the beginning to make you whole for your pursuit costs when you're at risk. But you're not receiving any outsized amount of development fee until that project is complete. The state is not going to give you money and let you profit on a deal that is not built.
That is not built, I understand that. Are you also managing this project?
Yes?
No, I mean, after it's complete.
Yes, we are managing this project.
Understand.
Yes.
So you obviously are aware that the $7.3 million development fee, I could open my computer the last time I did the calculation, the return on the amount, at least stated in our latest application, was about $563,000 of equity, developed funded equity, assuming that the development fee was coming back within the first few years, was over a 5,000% IRR on that money. So, for a lot of us sitting here, investing in the S&P, investing in other development projects, to invest $1 million and to get $7.3 million is sizable. And is also sizable when that $7.3 million is almost equal to the amount that you are asking in tax credits, in rather pilot credits, in taxes from not doing a full market rate project. Have you run an analysis of what a full market rate project would look like?
So I want to make something clear. Once these projects are funded, there's no more money. Okay, and we are at risk over the course of this project for any variations in the market, cost of materials. Okay, the idea that a project, once it's finally funded and in process doesn't experience hiccups along the way. Okay, we are at risk for any overruns, right? The first thing HCR, state agencies are going to do is cut back our development fee should there be cost overruns. So the idea that this is a guaranteed return is not, that's not how this works. And I can tell you from experience, working on the foundry, okay, that we had many unintended obstacles that we had to overcome. I couldn't open up that building for 3 months, okay, we were almost fully complete because the switchgear was delayed. And I was paying $150,000 in interest a month for the building that I could not lease up because I could not get the switchgear in, okay?
Are you telling me, though, that a project that could otherwise cost $300,000 a unit, that you have funding for over $515,000 a unit, that you're not going to be able to execute that?
Chrissy, market rate housing to a great extent here, ground up, does not pencil out, okay?
But why does it not pencil out?
You have tons of experience in development.
I do.
Why don't you, do you have any sense of why it doesn't?
Yeah, I do know why it doesn't pencil. You want to say why it doesn't pencil out?
Rent, the cost of building, cost of entitlement, all of these costs have outpaced our ability to fund projects, to have projects that pencil out market rate, all right, to need to hit rents that are $35,000 to $4,000 for ones, look to begin. It's not that they are not viable because the market will not support it, nor does necessarily, I think the city wants to focus on ensuring that there's affordable housing, right? There's a stable, if you will, affordable, as Newburgh continues to grow, right? This is the perfect project for this moment. As the city continues to grow, and we continue to see interest as a place for this to live, this is a sort of backstop of affordable, right? Which anticipates.
So what do you say? What do you say to neighbors who are asking why they are subsidizing other people's housing when they can't afford their own, with a developer who gets $7.3 million in a developer's fee and is also asking for almost $2 million in tax breaks from the neighbors? It is almost equivalent. Hold on.
If I may, I'll field this question.
And one more question, in why, when the application was submitted with $7.3 million of developer's fee, there was an additional $3 million that was additionally in there in profit that, according to MRB, should be going to taxes and should not be padded into this already almost double the cost project. I think this is a really, really hard sell. I think the development pro forma is very, very thick and really questionable in terms of selling to existing neighbors and existing community members who are paying taxes and paying rent. Yes, Newburgh needs affordable housing, and yes, I think that it's a fabulous project for that location. I do not disagree that that's probably almost close to what needs to be there. But do the neighbors need to be paying a $7.3 million development fee while also being asked to pay $7.12 in lost taxes when they are already struggling with their own? I'm just going to say that that 7.12 over 30 years is about $225,000 a year. And if we're paying half of somebody else's taxes to subsidize them to live there, that $225,000 a year in tax breaks actually equates to my previous example of the $430,000 median home, half of about 40 houses in the city every single year. We could pay 40 other people's half of their taxes instead of paying half of taxes for a project that is not slated for City of Newburgh residents. How do we sell that? How do I go to my neighbor and say, I'm sorry, you're losing your house and it's not affordable for Newburghers? It's not affordable for you who wants to be here and who have been here, but we're going to invite a developer here and pay him $7.3 million in development fee while also asking for $7.1 million in tax breaks out of your taxes. But if they were to build a full highest and best use project on this lot, we would achieve not only those taxes, but additional taxes for the city coffers that would help pay for.
Okay,
taxes,
I'm gonna jump in
cars,
here.
for
You've had the
police,
floor.
DPW.
You've had the floor for quite some time, and I think there are a lot of red herrings that are getting thrown into the basket here. If there was a market rate project for this vacant parcel that has been sitting empty for 50 years, we would have seen it already.
Well,
Okay,
not
we live
necessarily.
in a society.
Per Andrew's comment, he
Together.
worked very hard to get this parcel from
He-
this particular
he
owner.
did,
It was
he
not
did.
out on the open market. This is a particular individual who was not offering this out to the market.
Anybody could have approached that.
Right. So we're not going to do crosstalk here. I think this application has been before the board for 6 months. These questions could have been posed at any time via email, via the public hearing that happened last month. I'm
You
glad
specifically said
that
we were not supposed
Ms.
to
Amato,
comment last month. I asked you if you wanted our comments last month, and you said no.
produce a record, please, because that's just not true. Okay. This application has been before the board for 6 months. I'm glad that we've had an opportunity tonight to ask some of these questions and put them on the public record. This parcel is currently bringing $9,000 a year in tax revenue into the city. Over the course of 30 years, this project proposes to bring almost $8 million of tax revenue into the taxing jurisdictions. It will create 145 units of housing. The overwhelming majority of those units will be affordable. Okay? The best way to proceed with economic development in Newburgh is to have a mix of affordable and market rate housing. I think we all agree on that. And I think we can all agree that the state needs to do a lot of work when it comes to housing policy and when it comes to housing finance policy. But those are not problems that are within our grasp to solve here tonight, and certainly not within the four corners of the application that Mr. Schreiber has submitted. I think
It is
it's
our
also
obligation as board members
Ms.
to ask this
Amato.
question. And I don't think it's fair to be constantly berated for asking these questions. Is it not our jobs to be asking these questions?
Yes, and you had probably 20 minutes to thoroughly ask questions, and I respected that time, as did every member of the board. Now I'm asking you to respect the time that I have on the microphone. Thank you. This is a wonderful project, and I think it is folly to look at this project in a vacuum. This will help create gravity and attract more investment to Liberty Street, to downtown. We can't just say that, why isn't this market rate? If there was a market rate project of this size in the ether, it would be in development currently. The project that is before this board will help generate investment momentum that will bring market rate projects to the city. The hillside development will be on the table in the next few years, and I hope we will create enough momentum in the preceding time that there will be a lot of market rate development on the hillside when it comes time for that. Because as you noted, we do have city services to pay for it. And as the city grows and expands, there will be more services that need to be provided to the public. This project will bring $8 million in tax revenue that currently does not exist and would not exist but for this project. That money will be applied to city services for residents, new and olds alike. If there are any additional questions for the board, I'll turn it over to Mike.
I just have one statement because it wasn't, during the public hearing, we did not have written testimony, but we got a significant amount after. And I do want to point that out. There was a comment about neighbors and what will the neighbors think. And I do want to commend, I'm sure you asked them, so I'll commend you for having them reach out to us. Your neighbors turned out in force in writing, especially the property owners and business owners directly adjacent to this project. Overwhelmingly positive, and noting in their writing and in follow-up conversations I had about the significant need for not just having something there, beyond the 9,000, but having the foot traffic that the residents would bring, and welcoming the competition from the other commercial units. So that, thank you for that.
Can I ask a question about procedure? How long was the public hearing, or was it open, and was that said or stated? Because there was some confusion among people who wanted to also submit written public comment, and then there was an email that went around that there was apparently only public comment until the 5th. Did we publicly state anything about
I'm
the
not aware
public
of-
hearing being open and as an end date?
I'm not aware of any email that went around. I don't know what that means.
Andrew sent out an email to get people to support that said the 5th was when written.
Because I asked for a cutoff date so that way it could be considered.
So did we close the public hearing, and was that the 5th?
I have no idea what the 5th means. I'm not aware of that. Typically, what happens is that the public hearing remains open until the board considers the approving resolution.
So the public hearing is still open?
You're taking public comments, I mean, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
But the board can always determine that the public hearing is now closed.
No, if we've still got it open, people were concerned that they missed the 5th and did not submit comment that they wanted to. So if the public comment is still open, then we'll continue to get comment until the resolution. If we did not say directly.
With due respect, I don't know why you seem antagonistic to me.
No, I'm very frustrated because people were given this 5th deadline.
Okay,
And
don't
they
look-
asked,
please,
and they
with due
asked me,
respect.
why was it not published out there?
With
When
due
are
respect,
we
don't
allowed
look to
do
me
this?
to that.
Well,
okay?
I'm asking the question. When are we allowed to tell people that public comment is still open or not?
The public hearing was not, there was nothing in the public hearing that I recall. I'll reread the transcript. I do not recall there was any statement made that the public hearing was now closed. Okay?
Thank you. That's all I wanted was clarification. Thank you.
Any additional questions from the board at this time? Okay, great. Mr. Shriver, I would like to thank you for once again appearing before the board to receive comment and questions. All right. We'll move on to review of resolution number 2023-06-12-7 pertaining to 191 Washington Street LLC project.
So, Mr. Chair, this was a project that the board approved back in 2023, June of 2023. The applicant had asked for an approving resolution subject to them acquiring financing. The position was at the time that if they did not have an approving resolution, they would not be able to obtain their financing. The board at that time approved financial assistance that amounted to $6.1 million, including, excuse me, $652,000 of sales tax, $5.2 million approximately in a pilot, and $215,000 in a mortgage recording tax. There was a deviation from the UTEP, and the board approved a pilot of 15 years. It was approved unanimously with the members that were present. Part of the requirements was that the application be commenced within 24 months of the approving resolution. That would make it June of this year. The attorneys for the developer contacted us about 2 weeks ago and said they were ready to proceed. My recommendation to them was to come back to the board, at least advise the board
that we would now proceed and wanted to make sure that the board was comfortable with us proceeding with the closing of this matter over the next several weeks.
Great. Just for the public again, 191 Washington Street LLC is a mixed-use adaptive reuse project from a long abandoned former school building. There's a commercial component. Is that correct? Can I ask the applicants? Thanks. I don't want to misstate aspects of your.
That's correct.
Great. Can you just provide a top line? This is what you're seeking to do with this project. Housing, commercial components, your vision for the project.
Sure. So, as you stated, it's the renovation of the existing building, plus the construction of 2 new buildings on the adjacent lot. It's all one lot, but it's on what's now the parking lot. It is 70 residential units in about 14,000 square feet of commercial space. About half of that is a brewery that will create around 15 jobs. The rest is retail space. It's been some time since we got this approval. I think that, no surprise that the main reason for the delay is trying to secure financing and the challenges that we've been faced with over the time. We are now in a position in which we have that sorted out. We can move forward. The project is basically the same. We have to make some changes to the design for value engineering purposes. But also, when we came in front of the board with the project, it was a 100% market rate project. It is now actually 100% affordable. So that's one big change, which is, it's all part of our financing strategy.
Great. Thanks for that. Question for council. Is there an official action this board would need to take tonight, or is the board requested to take an official action?
No official action, it just really was put on the calendar, put on the agenda rather, as for your information, to make sure that you were aware, the new board members were aware of the project, and if there was any objection to proceeding. Otherwise, we'll work with our council and get this done as rapidly as possible.
Any questions or comments from the board? Any concerns? All right, great. Thanks for appearing before the board and sticking it out for the meeting. Very much looking forward to this project moving forward. Thank you. All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Meeting adjourned.